Hello, everyone. The Government of Canada set an important yet ambitious target of getting 5,000 zero-emissions buses on Canadian roads over 5 years. Doable? Yes, but it's not that simple. My name is Grace Riley. I lead Government and Public Relations at QTRIC, and I also lead QTRIC's Zero Emissions Bus Committee. Today, I am thrilled to welcome you to our fireside chat session on the emergence of 2021 Canadian Zero Emissions Bus or ZEB committees. We will be delving into what a ZEB committee really is, what their mandates and goals are, what successes they've achieved to date, and what challenges they've come across. I'm excited to welcome QTRIC's President and CEO, Jospa Petronic, QTRIC's ZEB Committee Chair, Erin Cook from Winnipeg Transit, the Ontario Public Transit Association, or Opta's CEO, Karen Cameron, and Opta's ZEB Committee Chair, Ben Case from the Toronto Transit Commission. Welcome, everyone. So I'm going to dive right into it. First things first, Karen, Jospa, what is a ZEB committee and what's the history of it? Jospa, I'll turn to you.
Sure. Thanks so much, Grace. I think it's a really apropos panel for us to have. I mean, for those folks who are newer to the industry or they're just entering into Opta's membership or QTRIC's, then you'll know that we generally set up committees when we want to have some governance structure around an issue. And over the last 4 years, really since 2016, so I guess 5 years, on the QTRIC side of the equation, we've been pushing out a lot of technical planning sessions. So electric bus planning sessions, hydrogen fuel cell planning sessions, autonomous smart shuttle sessions. And we had those sessions on a monthly or quarterly basis. And so there was a lot of push out of information. But we decided in 2021, or rather for 2021, to merge a lot of that stuff, create a bit of a governance structure around it, and make sure that our members were leading the dialogue rather than it being kind of top-down hierarchical from our staff of experts. We decided to really put members at the forefront and appoint and elect a chair, a vice chair, and establish a governance structure so that the Zero Emissions Bus Dialogue could really have a one-stop shop for all of our Canadian transit to come to, and a one-stop shop for all of our manufacturers, utilities, and service providers to come to know they could get their information, to know that they could provide their feedback, and when an important decision needs to be made, like policy guidance to the federal government, to know they had an established transparent voting structure around all things ZEB. So that's essentially where our ZEB committee came from. And I'll turn it over to Karen for her insight, but we're really delighted to be working with Opta. Over the last couple of years, well, really in 2017, 2018, QTRIC and Opta had a partnership on GHG emissions analysis. So we have a long-standing relationship. And I think the leadership at Opta and the leadership at QTRIC are on the same page about these matters. So over to you, Karen.
Yes, great. Thank you. And thank you to QTRIC for the invitation. The ZEB committee at Opta really has taken off. It came to be earlier this year when the Opta board had a strategic planning session, and as a result of that federal announcement, there was just a flurry of activity amongst Opta's members. We have over 60 transit systems that are members in Ontario. Everybody was covering the same ground, asking all the same questions, and because Opta tends to do a lot of its work through our committees, it was just a natural to establish that committee, but knowing that CUDA is also very active and a long-standing partner of Opta, as Jospa said. QTRIC is an organization that we have worked very closely with, and they had already helped us when there was the Ontario cap and trade system and that modeling that we did. So trying to align as closely as possible with what QTRIC was already doing was an obvious first step.
Oh, Grace, you're muted.
Thanks. It's definitely key to note the collaboration there from the get-go. So thanks for that. Quick question though on who participates. So Jospa, you mentioned that QTRIC members participate in QTRIC's. Karen, for you, is it Opta members only? What types of sectors are allowed to join each of your ZEB committees?
Karen, do you want to go first?
Sure, thank you. At this stage, in the early stages, there was a conscious decision made to limit the active meeting participation to transit system members only, with a plan, a very real plan to involve our business members and OEMs as necessary. There is a market sounding piece to the ZEB committee's work, so all members will ultimately be involved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, on the Qtrix side, there's a bit of history around it. So when we did all of our push-out sessions for electric bus and hydrogen fuel cell and autonomous vehicle, and then we started doing innovation P3 push-out sessions, and then eventually joint procurement sessions for electric buses. When we did that, we always had a policy of all Qtrix members could attend. So it was open to members. And, you know, as a membership organization, you really do have to give members value. You can't open it up to non-members because there has to be a value for membership fees. So we really structured around membership over the last several years, and then made sure that we had the key participants federally at the table. So that was Infrastructure Canada, Environment Canada, and Natural Resources Canada, because they had the money and the policy. So we always did that. What we did do, similar to what Opta is doing, is in sessions where we had really proprietary information. So we needed transit to have the opportunity to hear about the next generation tech from Proterra or Novabus or New Flyer or Siemens or ABB. We did have a closed door policy. So those OEMs would only be invited in based on their segment, and they would be excluded from the rest. So that was managed. When we moved into the ZEB committee now, we have it open to our members, of course. We've extended an invitation to Opta members who are not members of Qtrix, but are members of Opta. And of course, we've kept the invitation open to 10 provinces of ministries of transportation and economic development, and to the federal government, because we want to make sure Canada Infrastructure Bank and Infrastructure Canada are at the table. So that's pretty critical for us, because from that, we spin off our major technological projects.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's really important, the fact that government is at the table, actively participating, learning from, you know, what the industry is talking about. It's really, really great that they're able to join. So Erin, maybe a question for you. It looks like we've lost Ben, so we'll bring him back when he's available. But people ask, why do Qtrix and Opta have separate committees? So can you maybe explain to the audience what the importance is of having a separate committee for different jurisdictions, Qtrix being, you know, the national lens and Opta focusing on Ontario?
Well, I think the two main things are what you highlighted is national focus. So Qtrix members spans all across the country from East Coast to West Coast. So the focus is going to be different in different aspects, and different regions are going to have their own specific challenges with electrification and new technology, and everybody's going to kind of have their own focus. But Qtrix really ties all of those projects together and sort of connecting people across the country who have similar interests. The other focus, again, is the fact that we include industry partners in part of the conversation as well. So Qtrix has a very innovative focus or innovation, and it's finding out who's doing what out there and trying to create projects around that innovation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's amazing to hear. So thanks for that clarification. We'll get Ben's insights when he's able to join again as well to speak to Opta, unless Karen, you want to jump in.
Well, I can just say we're in our very early days with the committee. We've only had 3 meetings so far. We're still working out some of those elements of the collaboration, but that is the point, that everybody is looking for a solution that is the easiest path forward.
Mm-hmm. And maybe Grace, just as BEM is kind of coming back online, one little added insight is, as Erin noted, like we have membership across the country, and then as Karen noted, Ontario's Public Transit Association is very Ontario focused. And there is no doubt that there are lessons from TransLink, from BC Transit, from Calgary Transit, from Winnipeg Transit, that several of our Ontario Transit members would really benefit from. And then there's most certainly lessons we're pulling from our Quebec members in the ATUC family to try to get those into Ontario and get those across to the West Coast. So I think that national sharing arrangement is probably the most critical element for this partnership.
Mm-hmm, definitely. And I was just in a panel earlier this morning, most of the audience will have been as well, speaking with Scott Gilner from Brampton Transit, and he was talking about the importance of, you know, knocking on your neighbor's door and asking what they've been up to. So really hearing what people have been doing, what they've experienced. Erin, the fact that at least Qtrix on a national level can even go to Winnipeg and say, hey, what have you learned so far, helping out different agencies in different jurisdictions. So definitely very important, an important piece. We've touched upon it a little bit, but maybe I'll want to dive a little bit deeper into the collaboration between Qtrix and Opta. So obviously, Opta's been, you know, a long-standing association for a while. Qtrix was created back in 2015. So what's the history of collaboration between the two organizations, and where are we at in terms of the real collaboration within the ZEB committee? Jospa, I'll pitch to you first.
Yeah, well, I'm going to be a little bit bold about it. I mean, Opta is led by women, Kelly Poleshny and Karen Cameron. That is a starting point. That's really critical to put out there. There are not enough women in this industry. And so we have for a long time really worked on making sure that we advance women. And that's part of where we started the collaboration years ago. Karen and I roughly started about the same time. And so the collaboration was very effective from get-go. Then it became technical right away. But I think it's very important to note the difference in our types of organizations, which will then explain the collaborative history. CUTRIC isn't a transit association. We're a technology innovation consortium. And so CUTA is a transit association. Opta is a transit association. ETUC is a transit association. CUTRIC is a technical innovation consortium. It's very different. And it does mean, to put it bluntly, we do pick winners and losers from the perspective of projects, technology projects, right? We design projects to push the envelope, get IP out the door, get manufacturing with Job Creation Canada. So we do have to pick among our membership, those agencies that are willing to demonstrate, deploy, take risk, do technology. We generally don't have in our consortium transit agencies or manufacturers that are not doing something cutting edge, because there's nothing we can do for them, right? And that fundamental ontological difference is really important because it defines our partnership. Historically, if I look at our first partnership, as Karen alluded to, that was the cap and trade greenhouse gas emissions analysis project. And that was a lot of transit agencies in Ontario not quite sure what to do about the carbon cap and trade system, because at that time, the Ministry of Energy and Ministry of Transport had not communicated properly how carbon pricing would flow through fueling through to the transit agency. We were able to come in as a technology consortium, nonprofit, and say neutrally, we can establish a methodology for doing this that can help everybody see how they perform on the GHG picture, and do it neutrally so that all Opta members know they can believe the science they're getting, because we have no profit motive. There's no dividend. There's no surplus that we're generating. That is the basis of it. And so naturally, when ZEB increasingly became a hot topic, it made a lot of sense. Opta has a very well-functioning governance structure, a working board arrangement with working directors and working members. CUTRIC has a governance structure that's transparent and open with a working staff. And so it made sense that there would be an alignment in Ontario-focused dialogues around this, where CUTRIC could add in that technical component around project deployments, joint procurements, where we have technical expertise. And so that has fit very nicely as a yin-yang model.
Yeah, thanks for that, Jospa. And so, Karen, maybe to dive a little bit deeper there, where really did what was the driving force for the ZEB committee to be created within Opta? You know, from Jospa's talking about CUTRIC, it was like years of technical sessions. What was that main driving force for Opta to decide as an association that a ZEB committee was needed?
And Jospa's kind of framing of that governance, I think, really is important, because there's going to be some natural tripping points when you've got some different governance, but when you've got the will to collaborate like we do, beyond Kelly and myself, there's Anne-Marie Carroll, there's Sue Connor, also on the Opta board. So, this idea of collaborating was never a debate. It was going to happen. Like, I have a hard time now trying to come up with the reasons. It is just so natural. We've had Jospa and CUTRIC participate at Opta conferences for the purposes of giving exposure and for the purposes of advancing projects that we're working on together. And inevitably, we'd have a bunch of people come up afterward and say, "Who is that woman?" And it was just a natural for people to jump on this bandwagon. And as I said, Opta does all of its work through committees. The networking piece of what Opta does as a transit association is our single biggest success factor. So the creating a ZEB committee that would do that Ontario specific stuff. We do stay in our lane. We do Ontario specific work. And when it's outside of Ontario, when it's federal, we rely on our big sister CUTA for a lot of advocacy support, and we rely on CUTRIC for those technical pieces, and that works beautifully for us.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for that, Karen. So Bem, nice to see you back again. Thanks for joining in. Maybe I'll pose this question to you. So CUTRIC's committee began in January 2021 formally, and Opta's, I believe, in April just this year. So what have you seen so far within the Opta ZEB committee, and what's been achieved this far to date?
Well, it's early days because the QTRIC committee was, as was just described, born out of some history, of course, of good work done at QTRIC. And in this case, we're kind of starting from scratch, and so we've developed, been issued a kind of a mandate by the board of Opta, and we're working on clarifying that mandate. We're working on building work streams to drive each of the major objectives forward, and so there's a lot of planning going on right now. In addition, some of these work streams, which include kind of communicating to the various levels of government on the urgency and some talking points around funding. Some of these things are moving quickly. So in addition to the planning, in parallel, we're actually still driving some things forward, as well as our planning and advancing the bulk procurement kind of that's being offered on the back of upcoming TTC e-bus procurement. So there are a number of things that we're advancing. I'll just say that one of the other kind of streams of conversation that are happening now is, and this is obviously directly relates to this topic, is working with QTRIC, and it should be mentioned that I'm the vice chair of QTRIC board, and so this connection between the two is really a strong one, and we look to make sure that we're not duplicating effort, and that at some point very soon, I imagine that we'll be able to communicate jointly, who's doing what exactly in this space, and make sure it's clear to everyone, so there's no confusion, and that it's clear to everyone. For X, you go to QTRIC. For Y, you go to Opta, and for Z, it's the same thing because we've joined forces. And we jointly are offering, Opta, QTRIC are jointly offering services, information, et cetera, to transit industry and beyond.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a good point to highlight. Like, no one wants any duplication. We're all busy enough, so definitely minimizing that moving forward is always, at top of mind. So I think that that's a really good point to flag, Ben. Erin, on QTRIC's ZEB committee side, what have we seen so far? What's been achieved in the 6 months of operations?
I think we've sort of had two main goals, which are, supporting the government's initiative for getting 5,000 zero-emission buses on the road. So around that, we've launched a ZEB database to help track and monitor who's doing what in the sphere. And the other thing is that the one-stop shop. So a lot of the challenges early on were QTRIC members were being asked to attend multiple different meetings, and projects sort of became closed-door sessions for people that are involved. So what we've brought back to the ZEB committee is those continual updates on the projects that are underway. So whether it's autonomous shuttles or our joint procurement initiatives, Pan-Canadian hydrogen fuel cell bus, Pan-Canadian electric, those are all updated and highlighted in those meetings, and really highlighting the achievements of the transit agencies that are being leaders in this sphere right now. So those are sort of the keys that we've been focusing on, and then also bringing back aspects of our industry partners to highlight, innovations and what's coming down the pipeline, so that our members can be aware to what's going on. And then, the other highlight we've been doing is cases, giving presentations to transit members so they can highlight, the challenges and successes that they've had. So everybody in the transit sphere is kind of in a different boat when it comes to electrification, but we all sort of have that same checklist that we have to go through, from our ZEB planning stages to our deployment. So everybody's going to have a different outcome potentially, but the stages we go through are all the same. So it's good to see what other people are out there doing.
I definitely think that that is a really good point to raise, and considering with the Minister of Infrastructure announcing all of this funding recently, for all transit agencies, not just the largest agencies that are driving the country forward, like TTC in Winnipeg, but for those smaller rural transit agencies, the money will be available to them as well. So I think when they can, those smaller agencies can join and actually learn from agencies who have done it, are doing it, are learning those difficult lessons, can, take the hit. It's definitely helping those smaller agencies move forward and boost that number up, hopefully over the next 5 years. Maybe I can just ask Ben and Erin you a question. As chairs of each of these committees, what do you bring to the table, right? Like, Erin, you're coming from Winnipeg, you're leading the way out in the West, along with TransLink and others. But, what do you as a chair bring to the committee itself?
I think first is the transit focus and making sure that it stays on track and meeting transit goals. And also being the outlier from Winnipeg, not being Ontario-centric, and trying to make sure that QTRIC is inclusive and not just focused on Southern Ontario, which is the vast majority of transit agencies in Canada, but there are other transit agencies out there who want to be heard too as well. So I think that's what I bring.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely, Erin. And Ben, for yourself?
Well, as chair, I depend a lot on, and the structure of the ZEB committee at Opta is very much evolving into one where the members themselves take on big pieces of work and drive that forward. And these are agency members who are spending their time to drive a mandate forward to achieve some certain objectives. So as chair, it's primarily to help define those objectives and to make sure that those objectives are driven forward, and to empower those kind of who we refer to as work stream leads. Mm-hmm. Of course, me specifically, if I'm among a number of people who are largely responsible for the TTC's current e-bus fleet, and of course there's a large amount of learnings that came from that. There's also significant opportunities going forward and leveraging not just lessons learned, but also potentially economies of scale, kind of on the backs of the work that TTC is doing, if that delivery model makes sense for people. And so there are some things that I bring as a staff of TTC. And then lastly, in my role again on the QTRIC board and in other forums in this space, I bring kind of knowledge kind of together from various sources. So that's my aim anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are great points to flag, Ben. Going on the objective side of things, right? Like, Opta's committee is very much just taking off the ground. You're establishing those work streams and moving forward on those things. Jospa, maybe I'll pitch a question to you. Is QTRIC on target to achieve each of our mandates that Erin kind of highlighted a little bit earlier?
Yeah, we are. Having said that, it's important to clarify what are those mandates. So the QTRIC ZEB committee is governed by a charter, and that charter has very broad goals within it. But within those goals, one of the key goals was stemming from last year, lobbying for and securing billions of dollars for ZEB-specific technology. That's point one of our 5-point federal plan that our members fed into, and we achieved it. We got $2.75 billion out the door with Minister McKenna. We were part of that announcement with OC Transpo. It's a winner. So definitely we were on track there. Allied to that, though, is the fact that the minister specifically asked us to set up the one-stop shop that was an easy place for her team to go to for a monthly update as they develop the rules around that $2.75 billion and then the rules around the other billions that will come thereafter. And so the one-stop shop of the ZEB committee has achieved that because we have ongoing and regular participation there by infrastructure, by NRCan, by the critical federal ministries who are writing those rules. So it's definitely achieved those goals. The second goal within that Erin alluded to, which I just think is a game changer, is the data trust. And, we were yammering on about this for years, about sharing data. And years ago, I was a debutante in transit. I don't come from transit, I come from the electric car industry. So it was new and anathema to me to understand that actually transit typically didn't have a cloud platform where all telemetry was shared. That was actually surprising to me. I didn't understand why that didn't exist. Now we understand why it doesn't exist. And it's not it can't be done. It's just, it hasn't been done. And so that data trust is critical because now we can see at QTRIC, how buses perform in TransLink, how they perform in York Region, sharing them at the ZEB committee over time so people can see in real time how do these things perform compared to the promises made. So that data trust is actually coming up. It's working both on the prediction of how many buses are out there, and everybody has the same audited number of how many ZEBs are promised and on the road. And then from those ZEBs that are deployed, how are they actually performing? And that is the fourth point of our 5-point plan. And I would say where we're in development, the challenge ahead, is still developing that idea and that acceptance at the federal and provincial levels that this is not a sidewalk labs issue. We've had that raised. You're building this massive data trust. It's hugely powerful, but are you tracking personal data? And it's taken us a few months, over a year, to convince our federal partners, no, there's no Sidewalk Labs issue here. This is not personal data. It's the data from assets that allow for evidence-based decision-making. So we are on track for the data trust. We're on track for federal lobbying, but there's ongoing deliverables ahead.
Yeah, definitely important to raise there. Q-TRIC's 5-point plan, I think, has been key in moving a lot of Q-TRIC's advocacy forward, but really for the advancement of all agencies across Canada. So it's great to see that things are starting to pay off. So maybe a question from our audience. Erin, I'll pitch this to you. So how effective have the ZEB committees been in helping the agencies prepare transition plans from a financial and technical standpoint?
It's hard for me to see, I guess, as a chair. So it's something that we're tracking, and that's part of who's moving towards the rollout stage. I think it's been good at connecting people. I know personally, I've found a lot of connections, just finding out who's doing what in the industry. That I wasn't aware of before necessarily. So I think a lot of transit agencies benefit from that. But I think it's something that we'll continue to monitor and report on. We definitely do tracking of our ZEB committee to see who's attending and whether we're reaching our audience. So that's really our goal. And we've found that from session to session, the number of transit agencies in particular has been increasing. So that's really what our goal is, and wanting to hear feedback from people so that we continue to be relevant. Yeah, continuing to be relevant, kind of moving to what the audience really needs is so key. And Karen, maybe just touching upon what you had said earlier, as well as bringing people together. Erin, if you're finding that personally that helps you, you're learning a bit more about what people are up to, helping with that networking. It seems like Opta really focuses on that as well. So I realized the time, it's flown by. Maybe what I'll finish with is a little rapid fire round to each of you. Karen, I'll begin with you. So if you could leave our audience with one piece of key information about ZEB committees and Future Forward, what would that be?
Oh, that's a tough one. I mean, for Opta, someone like an Anne-Marie Carroll, for example, is always, from an association perspective, about the larger operations helping the smaller ones. It really is that community of agencies, and with the additional resources that the large systems like York Region and TTC and OC Transpo that they have, they're very willing to share that, and they do it through Opta, and we make it digestible and usable for our smaller systems. So that's kind of just a general approach to all of our committee work, and that's what the ZEB committee is going to do. Most at the end of the day, there'll be standard operating procedures, there'll be standard roadmaps, there'll be standard, there'll be standards. So that's we're going to get there.
We are. Standards are very much a key piece to it all. Ben, if there's anything that you would want the audience to leave with today, what would it be?
I think that the main thing is that there's a lot of perceived risk, there's actual risk as well with the adoption of zero emissions buses. These are in the form of technical, financial, and operational. And I think the role of the ZEB committees, their primary role should be to de-risk this, and thereby advance adoption of zero emissions vehicles for the buses, for the broader fleets within our transit agencies, and then to serve as a model for commercial fleets, which is kind of the holy grail to ultimate, emissions reductions that are both local, improving air quality and reducing noise pollution, and ultimately global emissions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Great points there, Ben. Erin, 30 seconds or less, key piece of information.
I just think that if you're in the ZEB sphere, committees are the best place to go to get information to help you along your way. And, regardless of whether you're a supplier or a transit agency, we all need to connect and work together, and ZEB committees are a great way to connect.
Thanks, Erin. Kind words there. Last but not least, Jospa, I will
Sure. So I'll say two things. One is if you're in this space, you can't do it alone. You need your utility by your side. And we've been saying that for years. And everybody on this line agrees with that. But utilities are one area that we had hoped to merge into our ZEB committee. They've asked us to maintain in parallel our power providers working group. And that's because the utility business around the regulated rate is undefined right now. And there's not one utility in this country that has a transit electrification strategy on the regulated rate. It's an ongoing issue. It's an ongoing issue of concern. And we cannot easily copy and paste California to Canada. So that's an ongoing discussion that we hope to bring light to. Both committees are working on that. The last thing I'd add is the 2.75 billion, the rules are coming out, but once the rules are out, I strongly encourage you to not assume that they are set in stone. It is all negotiable. All of it's negotiable. And that is my firm position. We have asked NRCan in the past to rewrite their rules, and they did it for us, and we got 13 million to Brampton. It is possible to rewrite the rules once the rules are out if they don't work for transit. And so we will, at both committees, be addressing those issues.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And thank you to all of our speakers today for a really interesting and jam-packed session in 30 minutes. Thank you to our audience for tuning in to a very timely dialogue. It's clear that ZEB committees really are here and now and here to stay until we can really get everybody's zero emissions buses on the roads. We have a session on EXO's on-demand session coming up in 10 minutes, so make sure you tune into that. If you've yet to sign up for our virtual networking session this evening, starting at 6 p.m. Eastern, make sure to do so. I know we're all facing some virtual face-to-face real conversations, so it's a great place to do that and continue the dialogue. So once again, thank you everybody for tuning in, and see you all in the next session.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.